Infectious disease is caused by an agent. Well, many diseases are, but especially infectious disease. I want to make something clear now. An agent is something that must exist for the thing to happen. And this could be anything, even not healthcare related. After all, if you want to buy an insurance plan, you have to talk to an insurance agent. You cannot ring up the company directly. You have to talk to an insurance agent. Now, nowadays, maybe you can buy it online, but then what's happening is the software that you went through takes your information, and then behind the scenes in the back office somewhere, an agent approves it. So insurance, in order to buy insurance, you have to talk to an insurance agent. If a government needs something done on the down low, they send an agent, a secret agent, like James Bond. So he is a secret agent. If you want to get a disease, then an agent is the one that must be present, which is not as obvious as it sounds. What spreads malaria? Correct, but is mosquitoes. But is a mosquito the agent? Is there a mosquito here in this slide? Is mosquito listed here on the slide? And you notice that no, it's not, because bacteria, viruses, parasites are all microscopic. So what's going on here? The mosquito does not need to be present for malaria to spread. I know it's the most common way to be spread, but what's really spreading malaria is a parasite. A parasite that feeds on the blood cells, human blood cell, or many animal blood cells. But then when a mosquito bites a person who is infected, the mosquito sucks up the blood, and then the parasite gets sucked up into the mosquito's mouth too. And then the mosquito flies somewhere else and then bites into another person. And in order to do that, they inject some of their saliva, which has a little bit of an anticoagulant, so it doesn't clot up. And in order to suck up that person's blood, and now the parasite in their saliva gets introduced into the bloodstream, and that's how it's spread. So malaria is spread by parasite. It's a Plasmodium parasite. So the parasite is the agent for malaria. How can we prove this? Well, it's a little unethical, but if I went to somebody with malaria and it's in a completely sealed room, so no mosquitoes anywhere, and I took a needle, a syringe, and drew some of their blood out with a needle, and then casually walked over and stuck somebody else and squirted the syringe into them, they would get malaria too. No mosquito involved. So malaria is not an agent. What is malaria? We'll talk about that soon. All right, the following is a series of cartoons that I drew, and it's a little hard to read. Well, I'll read it to you. Okay, so whenever there's an infection, then the patient usually complains of redness, pain, and swelling, and fever. And it's common and it's completely understandable to think, then the infection did this to you. Actually, way more times than not, I can't really think of a time where it does, the infectious organism does not do this to you. It's what your body does to itself. It's a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. Redness, pain, fever, and mucus, and swelling, these are all defense mechanisms, and this is how it works. Here is a little microbe, and what does it want? It wants the same things you want. It wants enough to eat, a place to stay, a place to sleep, if it, its version of sleep, a place to be safe and protected, and a place to grow the next generation, its offspring, a safe place to raise its offspring. Same thing you guys want, same thing everybody wants. The problem is that the things it wants is not only what you want, but it's you. They want you to do all these things. They want to eat you, they want to live in you, they want their offspring, their children, to grow up big and strong in you, and they will eventually start taking up space. So not only are you being drained of the nutrients you need to survive, but there's now stuff building up inside you that's taking up space that you really need to reserve for your own internal organs. And that's a problem, to the point where if we allow these microorganisms okay, so we say, all right, you know what, live and let live. You can have this little corner of my body as long as you don't get in the way. The problem is they don't know any better and they get in the way. So eventually it becomes incompatible with your life. You got to do something. What you do then is have these patrols, these cellular defense mechanisms. That is your immune system. And the immune system can get crazy complicated. It's an entire textbook. It's an entire specialty in medicine for immunology. So today's lecture, like all the other lectures this semester, is a gross oversimplification of medicine. But anyway, here is one type of defense cell. It's your white blood cell patrolling your body, checking every surface for ID. It basically stops anything it comes across and says, stop. You stop. Show me some ID. And sure enough, on all surfaces on our body are identification markers. I mean, our life is made of molecules, and all of our cells have a kind of molecule on the cell surface that contains an identifier that says, I am part of this. This is my passport. This is my citizenship card. This is proof that I am part of this organism that is our country. And so they see it, they recognize it and say, very good, I'm sorry to bother you, have a nice day. And they move on to the next surface and check that molecule. If it comes across a surface that does not show the appropriate identifier, for those of you who want to know more, you can Google major histocompatibility complex, MHC, and that's what it's looking for. Then it's going to attack. It attacks and it sends off alarm signals. So the microorganism does not want that to happen, and instead of causing you anything that makes you feel bad, most microorganisms try very hard to not cause you to feel anything. It stays on the down low, it stays under the radar as best as it can. So then what happens then with redness, pain, fever, swelling? Eventually, the microorganism or one of its offspring, if the colony grows large enough, it's just inevitable. You cannot stay hidden forever. Eventually, it'll come across one of your defense cells that detects it. And then the defense cell throws off the alarm. What alarm? Well, there are things like histamine. It's not here, but histamine. You've heard of histamine, right? Hay fever, pollen season. What happens when you are covered in mucus and sore throat and redness, red itchy eyes? You go over to the drugstore, you buy an antihistamine. So while your body is throwing off signals, alarm signals, you're taking a drug that suppresses it, prevents those alarm signals from activating. It's an antihistamine. So one of the results of these alarm signals is, first of all, the red alarm, and that's pain. Pain is not caused by the microorganism. It's what your body does to itself, and it's a way. It does two things. First of all, it's a way to tell you, pay attention over here. There's something wrong over here, and no, you cannot. Do not ignore me. This is something very serious. Look over here, and that's what the pain does. Pain also has a very important role of what is doing. Whatever you just did, please don't do that again. That's another thing that pain is very useful for. So those superheroes in the comic books where their like origin story is something made them unable to feel pain, complete science bunk, because they won't last very long without the sensation of pain. What's another thing that happens? Now, imagine Russian paratroopers landed in Suffolk County, all the way over in Montauk Point, which is the easternmost point of Long Island. It's a tourist attraction. There's a lighthouse there. It's very scenic. Not much else to do, but very scenic. It's sort of like one of those bucket list things. I've been there. How many of you have been out to Montauk Point? Ever? Very scenic, right? Okay. But this superhighway doesn't go out there, does it? You get on the Long Island Expressway, turns into the Northern State Parkway, but somewhere around halfway through Suffolk County, it ends, it stops, and you have to switch to side streets so you are doing a nice 55 miles per hour, and I'm saying 55 because my voice is being recorded, it's going up on YouTube. And so nice 55 miles per hour, but then suddenly the highway stops. You go into side streets with lots of red lights, and then it goes into small streets with lots of stop signs, and then instead of 2 lanes, it goes into 1 lane, and then dirt paths, and then finally you see the lighthouse. Can you imagine if the alarm goes off, like Russian troops have landed on Montauk Point? Let's get the army out there. Let's fight them. Well, our military trucks are kind of wide. Our tanks are kind of heavy. Not only do the troops need to go out there, but their ammunition, their food, their water. We need to send hospital equipment. We need to send all of the the materials, not just the men, but the materials, to go out there to fight the invader. How do we get it out there with those tiny, tiny little roads? How do we make our supply system reach all the way out there? We got to build more roads. We got to widen the roads we have to support these heavy infrastructure vehicles. So we make more roads. That's what the body does. They take your blood vessels that are, networked throughout our body, and the area of infection, those blood vessels get wider. They even grow more blood vessels and make those ones wider in order to send more of our body's defenses out there. Well, what is the result of that? Well, more material, which means fluids, because our blood is fluids, more material get out there. The more raw materials, the more defender cells get out there, but they all take up space. They can't just cram into the little space we got. They use up space, and the thing starts to swell. The area starts to swell. So we've got pain and we've got swelling. And what color is this swelling? Well, the more blood that gets out there, the more red blood cells get out there. Red blood cells are red, so the more tiny little red dots that appear under our skin, the redder the area gets. We call that in medicine erythema. Don't worry about it, but it's redness, pain, swelling. Redness, pain, and swelling is inflammation. Redness, pain, and swelling is inflammation, and the suffix of inflammation is itis. So when you have redness, pain, and swelling on your hand, you have handitis. We don't call it handitis. We get a little more specific with the terminology. But you got redness, pain, and swelling in your belly, you get bellyitis. We didn't call it belly. We use a more professional term, but it's something itis. So whenever you hear the word itis in a medical context, it's redness, pain, and swelling, and either because of there's an infection or any kind of insult that caused the cells to complain, and that causes an itis. I know in your general conversation, your slang, itis means the sleepiness you feel after a large meal, like I got the itis, but that's in general plain English, slang English. Once you enter a medical area, when you say itis, then they say which one, where, and they mean redness, pain, and swelling. If you have a respiratory infection, your airway, then you will have a buildup of mucus that's also caused by your body. What does mucus do? It floods and surrounds the attacking agent with mucus that makes it sticky and kind of traps it, so they don't travel very far. It's like spraying sticky gum on the floor, and the invading troops, get stuck on it. It's like a roach motel sticks the roaches onto that sticky surface. And then what happens is in your lungs, we have other mechanisms that transport that mucus up to your throat. It's like a conveyor belt. And there you feel that mucus buildup in your throat, and you reflexively swallow. And that's okay. It's more protein. So you digest that infectious agent, add its raw materials to your nutritional stream. Or if you are of a certain kind, then you wait until you get to a socially acceptable opportunity, and then you spit it out. Either way, it's no longer down in your lungs, it's up in your mouth, so you can dispose of it. So that's the job of mucus. Fever is also a body strategy. When you feel fever, what happens is your body is trying to cook the invader. That's really what's happening. Your temperature is supposed to be, anybody know? Anybody have children? You've memorized this number. What is the normal body temperature? 98.6. Now, if you're not exactly 98.6 with your home thermometer, don't panic. First of all, your home thermometer is not that accurate. It just pretends to be. And then the 98.6 is only the average. The general population is in a bell curve around that average. As long as, if you're like a degree above or below, don't sweat it. Literally, don't worry. It's probably okay for you. But if you're over 100.2, that is technically a fever, although not yet a reason to call 911. If you're up to 104 degrees, okay, now you can start thinking of calling 911. Something is seriously wrong. So what does fever do? What's so great about fever that your body would purposely do that to itself? Well, organisms that evolved to prey on mammals, warm-blooded animals who are all around that range, 98.6 degrees. Some a little hotter, like cats. Some a little cooler, like some of the smaller mammals. But they're all around that range. Organisms that evolved to survive there preferentially wants temperatures around that range. Their biochemistry, just like ours, works best around that range. So if in defense, one of our body ratchets up the thermometer or the thermostat to 100 or more, what happens is it slows down or prevents some very important biochemical reactions that the microorganisms are depending on to survive. And one by one, though, they will start dying out, and that's why fever exists. Well, wait a minute. If we needed to be 98.6 or somewhere around there, so 96 to 99 degrees, then, or 97 to 99 degrees, then won't our cells start to degrade and die off under that high temperature? And yes, it does. The idea now is that if we do a trade-off, I kill one of you, we kill one of me, I kill one of you, we kill one of me. Eventually, the invader will run out of cells before we do. It's called attrition. And hopefully, by the time the number of invaders are killed off, there's still enough of the human left to survive this experience there. So redness, pain, swelling, mucus, and fever are all strategies. If you look really closely at this microorganism drawing, you see little, looks like tuning forks or Y-shaped gray things surrounding this poor little guy. Anybody guess what these are? The shape gives it away. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you'll never know. You can't guess it. Anybody seen this? Not really messages. Not antigens. Antibodies. These are antibodies. When your body makes antibodies, they are in this shape. What do they target? Antigens. Antigen, remember Gen at the, let me zoom out. Let's go back to slide 2. The word antigen is an agent, is a subcategory of agent. An antigen now is more specifically medical. Agent is not specifically medical. It's, like I said, it's general English, but specific medical terminology for something that causes an infection is antigen. And what this really means is Gen is the suffix for, it means creating whatever's in front. So antigen is whatever causes an antibody reaction, an immune reaction. So pollen is an antigen. The surface of a bacteria, virus, or parasite is an antigen. So the antigens are targeted by antibodies that your body makes. What is the antibody's job? Well, the top of the Y part is designed to attract to the antigen, a specific molecule. The other end of the Y part is there to act like an indicator, like I found it. So it's like your job. If you were an antigen and you're asking, what is my purpose? Then the answer is, your purpose is to patrol the body looking for this molecule. And if you find it, you're supposed to grab it and hang on tight and scream at the top of your lungs, I found it, I found it, I found it. That's it. That's your job. And then other parts of your immune system, like white blood cells, natural killer cells, hunter killer cells, memory cells, T cells, lymph cells, macrophages, all of these other immune systems will hear in the far distance, I found it, I found it, I found it. And like somebody found something, and they go investigate. And then they find you, and they go, good work, citizen, we'll take it from here. And then they do their thing. Attack, destroy, surround, engulf, like that. That's what an antibody's job is. Okay. An important concept in let me go back here. So, redness, pain, swelling, mucus, fever, these are all things your body does on purpose to fight off an infection. In fact, fever, now inflammation is any insult. You bang your thumb with a hammer, it's become red, swollen, and painful. But it doesn't mean you're infected. It just means the cells were complaining that it was hit by a hammer. So that's not specific to infection. But fever is pretty specific to infection. There are some diseases that cause a fever without infection, but at least in emergency medicine, when a patient shows up with a fever, everybody assumes there's an infection going on. We got to find it, where the source of the infection, what's the antigen, etc. And so overall then, why do these cold remedies exist? Because you go to the drugstore. Why do you go to the drugstore? Because you are feeling redness, pain, swelling, fever, and mucus, and you feel bad. That makes you feel bad, so you go to the drugstore and you specifically look for products that reduce redness, pain, swelling, fever, and mucus. If they're supposed to be so good for us, why do we try to get rid of it? Because we live in modern times. We are 15 minutes from a hospital if we call 911. We used to be 5 minutes from a hospital anywhere in New York City, but hospitals have shut down for various reasons. So now it's 15 minutes, assuming no traffic jam or anything. Anyway, if things get bad enough that our bodies can't fight it off by itself, then we can call 911, or we can go to our doctor, regular clinic. We can make an appointment with a doctor, or we can go to an acute care facility, in those strip malls, the one between Chipotle and the cell phone store, that kind of acute care facility, and they will give you something. So, and then they will give you like a specific medication, an antibiotic or an antiviral or antiprotozoan, depending on the kind of infection they found that you got, or an antifungal. Is a fungus here? Should I have mentioned fungus? Maybe I should have included fungus here. So we have a modern healthcare system to rely on. So in that case, there's no real reason for us to sit and suffer through redness, pain, swelling, fever, and mucus. It's socially awkward. It makes us ugly or unattractive. People don't like hanging around near us when we sniffle and hawk and etc. So we don't want to deal with the symptoms of it. In ancient times, before there were hospitals and drugstores, this was really our best way to fight off infection with redness, pain, swelling, fever, and mucus. How infectious organisms go from one infected person to the next. It's called the chain of infection. And the reason why it's called a chain of infection is because if you look at a chain, a classic phrase about chains is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Not only is a chain in segments, so you have to go from one to the next, but it's the only chance you have to break a chain, which is usually like a heavy metal, very strong, is to find one that has a defect or a weakness and break that link, because the others are going to be too strong. And now here's something called a new word, pathogen. What is that? A pathogen is a subset of antigen, and antigen is a subset of agent. A pathogen is anything that generates disease. Patho is disease. So not all antigens generate a disease. Not all antigens are pathogens. Like pollen or cat dander. Dog saliva is an antigen because some people are allergic to dogs, but not a pathogen. If a dog licks my face, they won't cause a disease in me. They will just make my eyes swell up till they feel like they're going to pop out of my skull. So I am allergic to dogs. I don't hate dogs, I'm just allergic to it. I wish I was not allergic. I would get one, but I cannot because I am allergic to dog saliva. So dog saliva is an antigen for me, but it's not a pathogen. A pathogen then is an agent that causes disease. How does it get from, well, a reservoir is the person who is already infected or some other place where the microorganism grows and reproduces and just spreads around. A portal of exit is how it leaves their body. Transmission is how it goes from one human to the next human. And the portal of entry is how it goes into somebody not yet infected, and then its establishment in the new host is then now the disease is in the next person. Because just because a pathogen gets into a not yet infected person doesn't mean they're going to get the disease. After all, if they have a healthy immune system, let's say instead of an entire army, the Russians land 5 guys into Montauk Point. So they kick up a little they kick up a little noise. They get their image on the newspapers, but it's not going to take much for the New York State National Guard or the U.S. Marines to go out there and just arrest them. So even though they are pathogens in the military, they are foreign nationals, foreign military soldiers trying to do something bad to this country, they're not going to get much done because they're going to be detected, they're going to be apprehended, and then whatever we do to invaders will be done to them. So they don't. It doesn't. Just because a pathogen is in our body doesn't mean it's guaranteed infection. There has to be enough of them at the right time, at the right place, to actually cause an infection. For example, HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, even if you had unprotected sex with somebody who was HIV positive, it's not a guarantee you will get AIDS. Even if you get a few of those viruses into your body, it's not a guarantee you will get AIDS or become HIV positive. Because if the viral count, the viral number that was put in you is small enough and your immune system is healthy enough, they will all be hunted down and destroyed, and you don't get HIV positive. That said, I wouldn't use that as a strategy. Like, I wouldn't use hope as a strategy to stay HIV negative. Wear a condom if you cannot trust your partner completely. Don't use IV drugs, illegal IV drugs. Okay, so that is an example of somebody who got HIV into their body but did not end up HIV positive. Okay. So of all of this, all this chain, which one is the most likely to, most easy to break? And that's the route of transmission. So sometimes it's called routes of transmission, routes or modes of transmission, doesn't matter how they say it. But these are the different ways they can go from one person to another. NationalGeographic.org I got this list from there, but the similar list is no matter which information source you get it from, and the grouping is my choice. Usually they're put it as a straight list, but I thought I would group it in as follows. Droplet and airborne both go through the air. The difference is droplets is going through the respiratory droplets, and you see images like this, right? Who made this? Don't sue me. It's educational purposes. So this guy's sneezing, and it's like a dramatic example. But even just ordinary casual breathing will make respiratory droplets from deep in your lungs exhale into the environment. There's no way to prevent this. You can feel it, because if you just breathe on your hand, you feel this moisture developing on your hand. That's respiratory droplets. Airborne, so droplet transmission means that microorganism, and usually at this point it's a virus, but not all, it can be other ways, other kinds. Some microorganisms must stay in a moist environment to survive. Get them dried, even for a short amount of time, and they break apart. They die and break apart. They cannot infect anybody else. So they must stay nice and moist in your respiratory droplet, in that microscopic tiny little bit of moisture that's coming out of your breath. They must stay in the droplet form. Some bacteria and viruses don't care about that. If they enter and if their environment becomes dry, they don't care. They can survive just fine as a dry form. Some bacteria can quickly turn into a spore when they are dried out, and they are still viable. All you have to do is add water, and just like a chia pet, they just sprout and reactivate. So that's airborne. What's the main difference between droplet and airborne is that droplet is heavier than airborne. Even as tiny as the droplet is, eventually gravity will take hold and it will start to fall. And once it touches the floor or a dry surface, it will then dry out, and immediately anything droplet dependent will be destroyed. Airborne doesn't care. Airborne will stay active or reactivated, reactivatable, and they are so light that any tiny breath of air, any tiny movement of air will propel it back up into the air, into the middle of the room, back again. If you've ever walked down Manhattan, the canyons of Manhattan, and you see a piece of paper just floating like 20, 100 feet in the air, and you're watching it, and you're expecting that piece of paper to eventually fall down to the ground, but just as it's about to do it, another gust of air blows that piece of paper back up 200 feet in the air, that's what the airborne particles are doing. Any gentle movement of air will keep it suspended and fight gravity. That's the difference. Which one is COVID? COVID is droplet transmission, not airborne. Because COVID needs a moist environment to survive. How far can respiratory droplets travel before finally it just falls to the ground or basically just dries out in contact with ordinary air at the humidity levels that we find comfortable? And you've heard this number before. You've heard this number again and again for a year straight. What's the distance before airborne droplets dry out? 6 feet. 6 feet. Where did this 6 feet come from? Here. Your respiratory droplets will travel for about 6 feet in normal dry air before they dry out, and then whatever was riding inside that droplet will be dried out and destroyed. If you Google, if you really go into this, if you do a deep dive, eventually you'll run across a few news articles where somebody misspoke, either World Health Organization or the CDC, and they said COVID might actually be airborne, and that almost caused a panic, because if the COVID became designated airborne transmission, then the 6 feet number is completely useless. Somebody with COVID could sneeze into this room, leave, and then the next day somebody walks in, takes a breath in, and now they got COVID. So that whoever said that must have been severely reprimanded. Said, never open your mouth again, that kind of a thing. So COVID is droplet. Okay. Direct physical versus indirect. Direct versus indirect. Direct transmission means you must be in physical contact with the infected person to get it. So like a sexually transmitted disease. Syphilis is not only transmitted by sexual body fluids, but in third stage syphilis, stage 3 syphilis, you can get it from shaking their hand. By that time, there are spirochetes on their skin, and just shaking their hand will transfer the spirochete from palm to palm. So physical touching. So now, so how do you protect yourself from direct physical contact with somebody with that kind of a disease? Well, don't touch them, right? Wear gloves if you're a healthcare provider. And then there are different levels of physical touching, like sexually transmitted disease or other sexually transmitted diseases. Then a simple handshake will not get you infected, but because assuming that your skin is intact, so there are no cuts in your skin. The problem with sexual intercourse is that no matter how much lubricant is used, the friction causes micro tears in the skin that allows sexually transmitted viruses and bacteria to leave the body. That's a portal of exit, a micro tear in the skin, micro meaning very, very small, and then it'll enter the next person through the micro tears in their skin, and that just happens. There's no way to prevent that from micro tears from happening with even brisk friction. So that's why condoms are so important. Some kind of barrier device is so important. Indirect is the microorganism can survive for a little bit, for a short amount of time. And so that is the infected person touches the surface and then walks away, and the next person touches their surface and then puts their finger in their mouth, rubs their eyes, picks their nose, does something to introduce that organism into an opening in the body. So that's indirect. So doorknobs, indirect transmission. Doctor's necktie. there was a time when all doctors must wear a tie and to be professional. But they were finding that by seeing one person after another, they would wash their hands like they're supposed to, wear gloves like they're supposed to, even wipe down their stethoscope with alcohol like they're supposed to. But their necktie would touch the one patient and then touch the next patient, and the necktie was transmitting a disease throughout the hospital. So many hospitals now forbid long neckties. If you must wear a necktie for fashion purposes, you can wear a bow tie, but otherwise, no, don't do that. Buffet spoons. Now that I've said that, I mean, I love buffets. I love going to buffets. But ever since I took a class in microbiology, I was just starting to wonder, this is before the pandemic. I took this class, and then I go to a buffet like, all these people are touching this buffet spoon, and now I'm going to touch it. So is this a disease? Is it a route of transmission? And I thought about this many times, like, should I wear gloves or what? And now, after the pandemic, after the lockdown, buffets do provide gloves. And nobody who uses a glove now will be thought lesser of. But before the pandemic, I thought, if I wore gloves, and I'd have to bring hospital gloves, and that might freak everybody out. I might be asked to leave. So finally, my strategy at buffets now is never touch my food with my fingers. Use the buffet spoon, but never touch anything with my fingers after that. Use forks, chopsticks. That's my solution. Okay. So those are the main categories: airborne or droplet, direct or indirect. And now, here are some variants of it. Fecal oral, which is a polite way of saying from their ass to your mouth. All right, so before you run to the office and say, and call human resources and say, my instructor used a bad word, or accused me of something very naughty, it works like this. A food service employee has hepatitis A. They go to the bathroom, and even though the sign says all employees must wash their hands before returning to work, this employee wants to stick it to the man. Their boss is a jerk, the customers are stupid, their coworkers are traitors, and they just had enough of this. They don't have time for this, and they don't wash their hands. So they go back out, and this is not just the cheap dives. This could be a 5-star restaurant or 3-star restaurant, because they're all commercial establishments are trying to cut costs wherever they can, which includes suppressing salaries. So this disgruntled employee or this lazy employee or this very, very busy employee doesn't wash their hands, goes back out, prepares your food, they bring it out to your table, you eat it, and now you have hepatitis A. From ass to mouth. That's what fecal oral literally means. That's probably how transmission happens here in New York City. But other outbreaks of hepatitis A are more common in this country, wherever there are peoples who would love to wash their hands, and they dreamed of having a sink to wash their hands in, but they can't. Any idea what kinds of demographics, people groups would fit that description? Who can you think of that who dreams, fantasizes about having a sink and a bar of soap to wash their hands in, but they can't because they have no access to it? Homeless people. So every once in a while, there are hepatitis A outbreaks among the homeless communities. It only takes one person to bring it into the community, and once they do, it spreads. there's an outbreak because they don't wash their hands, and then they share food. They fish food out of the garbage can. So one guy finds it, eats some, gives it to his friend, and say, "Ooh, it's still fresh," and then hepatitis A spreads. Another way that Hep A may show up in the news is we just had, well, not we, but the southern United States, the southeast United States just got walloped by two hurricanes. So every hurricane season, there's news of hurricanes blowing through the Caribbean. And Americans care because we're next. The Gulf Stream sends them up north to where we are. That's why it shows up on American news. But what we don't see on the news, American news, is that a few weeks later, there are hepatitis and cholera outbreaks in the Caribbean. Those areas in the Caribbean that don't have modern sewage systems, people use outhouses. Those villages that have outhouses or latrines and get their water from the well or from the creek, then what happens is the hurricane blows through, overwhelms the sewage system, causes it to overflow. The hepatitis A and cholera, which is another fecal-oral transmitted disease, overflows, soaks into the ground, settles into the water table, ends up in the wells, and then people draw water out of the wells with buckets, and they know they're supposed to boil the water, but sometimes things happen, life happens, and then they don't get a chance to, and so there are cholera and hepatitis A outbreaks in the Caribbean after a hurricane blows through. Bloodborne is, HIV is bloodborne. HIV is sexually transmitted, but how is it sexually transmitted? Body fluids, so bloodborne. Many diseases are bloodborne. Hepatitis B is bloodborne. Hepatitis A is also bloodborne, and it's not here on the slide, but those of you who have heard my voice will know that hepatitis A is mainly fecal-oral. So in your homework assignment, I'm going to ask you what is the most common or well-known mode of transmission for hepatitis A. For those of you who just hear my voice, you know the answer is fecal-oral. For those who are blowing off this lecture, who think they can pass this course without watching the videos, they're going to Google this, and then when you Google it, there's a good chance that you will be told in one of the Google responses that hepatitis A is bloodborne, and they will answer bloodborne, and I will mark that wrong. So please, there's a little reward for those of you who actually pay attention in class. Vector-borne is the mosquito. This is where the mosquito comes in. Vector-borne is any living animal that transmits the agent from reservoir to new host. That is vector-borne. So mosquito is a vector, rats is a vector. What's a disease in New York State that is famous for being transmitted by a vector, a living organism? The living organism doesn't cause the disease, but they transmit the microorganism. And it's been in the news the last couple of months. That's correct. That's not what I was thinking of, but somebody answered rabies. That is yes. You must be bitten by a rabid animal. Kind of, because I think they're implying that the vector, the animal, is not infected, not suffering from the disease. So a rabid animal is suffering from the disease. That doesn't make them a vector. That makes them a reservoir, and the route of transmission, the portal of exit is their saliva around their mouth. So it's more of a direct transmission. It's blood-borne, body fluids from an animal bite, but the animal is suffering from the infection. But what is an animal that's not dealing with the infection. They just carry it from one to the next. Zika virus, that's mosquito. So we already mentioned mosquito. It's an insect, but not a mosquito. New York State. Zika doesn't come up here. Not that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody who got Zika in the southern states and then hopped on a plane and ended up in New York State, but they didn't catch it here in New York. When you go for a hike in the park or the wilderness in New York State, you're told to be careful because you might catch Lyme disease, which is transmitted by the ticks. The tick is a vector. The Lyme disease is the disease by an agent that's transmitted in the tick saliva vector. Doctor's necktie is a vehicle. Think of a vehicle, a car, an airplane, a bus. They're dead. They're not alive. A car is not alive. Not yet. One of these days, their artificial intelligence will be so advanced that you say something bad about the car, you'll hurt its feelings. But not yet, right? So cars are still not yet alive. It's dead, so it's a vehicle. So a doctor's necktie, the doorknob, the buffet spoon is a vehicle. A carrier is somebody who is infected but is not showing the symptoms of. And you've heard of carriers in like medical psychodramas. Somebody gets infected but doesn't show it and runs around and infects other people, that they are a carrier. Okay, so your immune system. What are some things about your immune system? The skin is the first line of defense as long as it is intact, as long as you wear protection. There are some bacteria on your skin, and they're supposed to be there. That's called normal flora. In fact, if you had none of these bacteria on your skin, you would be sick. The normal flora is on your skin, and there's also normal flora in your gut, in your digestive system. They are supposed to be there. We evolved with them. We are in a symbiotic relationship, meaning that we've learned to work with each other and depend on each other. If you did too good a job of hygiene, and I'm talking like dousing yourself with alcohol several times a day, then you would, the alcohol itself would cause a problem. But eliminating these bacteria, these species of bacteria from your skin and from your digestive system will actually make you sick because they do things that you're depending on. Other things that are part of your first line of defense immune system, which you can read for yourself. Okay, and then if you swallow something in your mouth, then most of the microorganisms will end up being destroyed by the stomach acid. Large intestine has that more normal flora, gut microbiome, and in order to support your gut microbiome, you are encouraged to buy and eat things like probiotics. The probiotics industry is all about your gut microbiome to support it. Urinary tract, your not only urine but also feces, there's only one way they're supposed to go, which is in to out. Nothing is supposed to go out to in. If they do, they cause infections too, like a urinary tract infection. Okay, your immune system. You know what? I'm going to not spend too much time on the different kinds of immune system. These slides are just here, but as an He102, maybe these. I'm starting to think that the getting into like the different kinds of immune systems is just too much for this course. But you can read more about this if you're interested, like the antibodies, B and T cells, how they work. So I talked about inflammation already. So your immune system needs tender, loving care, just like everything else about you. If you ignore your immune system, if you neglect your immune system, then they will no longer be able to function like they're supposed to, and you will get sick more often. So how do you take care of your immune system? This way. These slides. But I think you've already heard these. All right. It's no wonder that when you are going through an especially stressful period of your life, you tend to get sicker a little more often. Like you catch a cold more easily, you get things that cause you a fever, because your stress takes away from your immune system. Go back to the mental health lecture, and the details there show that among the things that you shut down in order to improve your chance of survival in a fight or flight mode, you shut down your immune system. Wait, if the tiger is trying to bite me, don't I want a strong immune system? If the tiger is trying to kill you, then that event will be over in less than a minute. Either you got away or you didn't, and now you're dead. Infections take hours to days to weeks to actually cause a problem. So no point in worrying about something that will be a problem tomorrow if you're about to be killed in the next minute. So your stress system shuts down your immune system as a result. But now, in our modern times, there's no tiger trying to eat us. Instead, the things that cause us stress are stupid bosses, stupid customers, stupid coworkers, stupid professors, stupid police officers. And these these are not resolved in minutes. They are chronic, lasting days, weeks, months, years, decades. So as your body weakens the immune system because they're constantly in stress mode, fight or flight mode, then eventually the weakened immune system over a long period of time results in becoming sicker more often. Things that you cannot control that do affect your immune system are heredity, which is the genetics from your mom and dad, how old you are. That's just not avoidable yet so far. But there are things you can change, such as environmental conditions, your own health, and of course, what your public health officials can do to try to keep those nasties away from you. So preventing the infection is always the easiest, fastest, cheapest way. And of them, the easiest, fastest, cheapest way to keep yourself free of infection is hand washing. Another homework question. If you don't mention hand washing in that homework answer, it's marked wrong. That's primary, not letting you get sick in the first place. But there are other kinds of prevention. A secondary prevention is the person already got sick. It's too late to stop it from happening. But now that it's happening, give treatment so that it doesn't get worse. So the prevention is preventing it from getting worse. Tertiary prevention is preventing the side effects of the treatment from getting worse. And to borrow a non-communicative disease example, if you broke your leg, broken legs, let's say you broke your leg, people break their legs from falling off of stairs. So a primary prevention is putting railings on the stairs so people don't fall off the stairs in the first place. Teaching people that trying to do stunts on the stairs is stupid. It's a dumb way to die. And the more people who are convinced not to do stunts on stairs, the fewer people who break their legs. So that's primary prevention. Don't do it in the first place. But eventually somebody's going to fall off the stairs anyway and break their leg. So to prevent a broken leg from getting worse, what's a common thing to do to somebody with a broken leg? A common thing for a doctor to do for a broken leg? Put it in a cast. Put it in a cast so the bone has a chance to reset. That's secondary. Prevent the break from getting worse. But along these lines, your line, people are in a cast for about 6 weeks. When they finally take the cast off, what does that leg kind of look like? Anybody been in a cast? Any body part in a cast? Law strength for muscle, right. The opposite of going to the gym and getting those gains. Right? You go to the gym, you work out, your muscles get bigger. So you don't move that arm for 6 weeks, completely immobilized, your muscles will get thinner. So it's weaker. There may be some coordination issues. There may be some side effects from other therapies. So what about the medications? So the tertiary is to treat those side effects. So for an example of tertiary for a broken limb is, you said it already, physical therapy, right? It's no point in giving them physical therapy while they're in the cast. But after the cast is taken off, now they need to do some exercises. But the right exercises in the right way so they don't re-break it, because the bone is still a little weak. So they need a specialist to keep an eye on them, supervised exercise, physical therapy, so re-education, rehabilitation, if they were started on antibiotic to finish it, and also they need to recheck with their doctor to see how the recovery is going. That's tertiary. So, the HIV group. How do you stop people from getting HIV in the first place? You've used this time to look it up. You're a spokesperson, yes? Wear a condom. Safe sex in general. Avoid IV drug abuse. Okay, COVID-19 group. Everybody knows the answer here, right? How do you prevent people from getting COVID-19? What? Wash hands. Yeah. Mask. Social distancing. Yeah. So for the masks, let me quickly show you this thing here. So there are some cartoons here. Here is a mask diagram explaining the different kinds of masks that I drew here. So I don't have the time to explain it, but I may have to do a part 2 of this lecture anyway. And then chickenpox. So it's the chickenpox group. So vaccination, really, that's it. You could, yeah, because the other way to prepare people for chickenpox is to let them get it anyway, like in the first place. That's kind of more like a measles party, but the vaccine is really the best. Okay, so now the secondary prevention is, let's just jump to the answers here. I just want to state that I didn't coach these groups. I didn't give them the answer to give. I just accepted whatever line they wanted to go. So if somebody is already HIV positive, they have to take antiviral, retroviral therapies, because that's how you suppress the HIV from spreading in the body. But then what happens is and these antiretrovirals are very effective. People can be HIV positive but live a full life. And there could be somebody in this room right now who's HIV positive, and you'd never know it, because they're taking their antiretrovirals as directed, and their insurance is up and they're able to supply it. But sometimes there's a breakthrough, and breakthrough symptoms of AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So nutrition, exercise, and then close follow-up to make sure that the antiretrovirals are actually working. That's tertiary. Okay, COVID-19. Anybody actually know very quickly what are the therapies for somebody who actually have COVID? Somebody here must have actually got it. And then what did they give you? Go ahead. Yeah, steroids. That's true. Steroids for more serious cases. What happens is steroids, and these are the catabolic, not the anabolic, not the bodybuilder steroids, but the catabolic steroids like prednisone or something like that. Something ending in ONE. The reason why is because if you, I think I said it already in this class. I think I talked about. Yes, that ends in ONE. They are steroids. The category of steroids, the name ends in the letters ONE. Yeah, there's all kinds of steroids. I did talk about steroids here. Okay, yeah. So the other week I said that steroids suppress the immune system, and here we need a stronger immune system. What's going on? And what happens is one of the things about this many virus infections is that it causes the immune system to become over responsive. Overreactive. And sometimes the immune response is causing the problem itself. So that's why I give that. But a specific antiviral is Paxlovid. Is an antiviral. Okay, and then chickenpox is also antivirals. Depending, and then of different categories, different names. Typical zoster or varicella, anti-varicella viruses sometimes end in VIR, V-I-R. Yes. Oh yes, yeah. And any virus, the vaccine is definitely highly recommended. In fact, I'm overdue to get mine for this fall. Anyway, antiviral, so like something ending in vir, like cyclovir, acyclovir, valacyclovir, things like that. They are mostly for the herpes infection, but the herpes is also in a similar viral family. Okay, so tertiary prevention is that there could be some side effects from taking these drugs. And so medical side effects. And similarly here, medical side effects. Medication. Okay. I'm definitely not going to finish this today. I have to post a part 2 video here. But anyway, here's an example of primary, secondary, tertiary. Your homework assignment is going to ask you to pick a disease that is not mentioned in class. So no HIV, no COVID, no chickenpox, something else. So how do you pick one? Well, go out there on the internet and look for an infectious disease and then do similar. And this time you can do your own research along these lines. So what's primary, secondary, tertiary? More about the details of immunity, not really worrying about it. So I mentioned pollen and pet allergies. What does this have to do with infectious disease? This is how allergies work. There's been a horrible misunderstanding because remember what happens is with your immune system, it checks every molecule, it runs across, you guys know what a molecule is, right? I've been using this word a lot. I'm hoping that it means for you what I hope it means. a molecule is just any a string of atoms bunched together. Molecules form larger structures that eventually form cells, and then the cells join to form organs, and then the organs form to make a human being. Oh, this is a nice one. This is a very nice one. Who made this? smartencyclopedia.org. Oh, I'm going to have to check these people out. Oh, I love this. Okay, caffeine is a molecule, methane is a molecule, DNA is a molecule. So whenever you bunch atoms together to form functional structures, that's a molecule. So anyway, your immune system knows which molecules are part of self. Anything else is part of non-self and is attacked. But if it's trained properly, one of these, if it's trained properly, your immune system will learn that some molecules, although it's not self, it's also not dangerous, and will leave it alone. Like for those of you who are not allergic to dogs, your immune system learned that this dog saliva is not a vicious attack, infectious virus. It's just dog saliva. It's okay. That's the misunderstanding. So allergy is a immune reaction to a harmless molecule, whether it's peanut or gluten or anything else that somebody says the doctor told that they're allergic to. It's an overreaction. Asthma is a kind of allergic reaction. So if you have somebody who knows somebody who's suffering from asthma, that's what's going on. Their immune system goes crazy, whether it's dust or some kind of allergen, or it's even allergic to being irritated. So some asthma sufferers, their bodies, their airway reduces immense amounts of mucus. Their airways constrict, which means tighten, to the point where it's having trouble making air pass through, all because it thinks it's under attack. When their mind knows it's just a little dust, it's just a little irritation, but the lungs says, no, we're under attack. Shut down the gates, close the gates, call out the guard, and secrete mucus. So a very common medication for asthma sufferers are two categories: a steroid to suppress the immune system, and another drug to expand those airways again. It's a way to suppress the immune system. When an allergic reaction gets so bad that it causes a life threat, that's what we call anaphylaxis. And people with severe reaction to peanuts and seafood, the ones who can afford it, will carry around epinephrine in a special device called an EpiPen. If you have a friend who is suffering a severe allergic reaction and you're worried that they look really sick, then you should call 911. Autoimmune disease is another kind of tragic misunderstanding, but it's caused by the immune system misunderstanding a molecule that is in the body. They should know better, but for some reason your immune system decides, no, this is an invader, I will attack it. The problem is that it's your own body. You kind of need that. The best analogy I just thought of recently is there was one time I got a speeding camera ticket, and I remember that day, I remember that time, I remember that location, I remember I was not speeding, but I do remember this sports car zoomed right by me, and I thought, what a maniac, somebody should stop him. But I got the ticket. So somehow that sports car triggered the speeding camera, and by the time the camera took a picture, it was my car it took a picture of. So it accused me of speeding, even though I didn't. So that's kind of what's going on here. Something triggered the immune system to send out an alert, and instead of sending a picture of that thing, it took a picture of your own body, a molecule in your own body, and it sent a copy of this to all the stations and said, be on the lookout for this molecule, wanted, dead or alive, attack on site, armed and dangerous. And so anytime this molecule showed up, your immune system attacked it. The problem is it's you. So autoimmune means self, immune against self. And here are some diseases that are known to be autoimmune: eczema, lupus, rheumatic fever, rheumatic arthritis, Crohn's and irritable bowel syndrome. These are all autoimmune. And so and sure enough, if you look at the treatments for them, it's some kind of steroid, a catabolic steroid. And that's a big clue that it's autoimmune.
When we're talking about infectious disease, then we have to talk about vaccinations. Vaccinations, by the way, apply to viruses and bacteria and even protozoa. So all of those possible infectious agents there is a vaccine for, but not all of them. This is the principle of vaccination. Instead of waiting to be exposed to a new infectious organism and then fight it off, there is a way to prepare the body for a future infection. And the idea is to take advantage of those antibody factories that I talked about before. Antibodies, remember, are created for one specific molecule, only one molecule and nothing else. And then when the antibody detects it, they grab on, and the other end of the antibody screams, I found one, drawing attention to itself so that the other defense cells approach and attack whatever's on the other end. So it targets unusual molecules. And sometimes these unusual molecules turn out to be a misunderstanding, and they are the body's own molecules, but that's if the system fails. That no system is perfect. Biology is not perfect. No matter what kind of mechanism you put in, it's going to fail some way, and so this is one of them. But anyway, there is a way for medicine to take advantage of this system, this antibody production recognition factory system, to our advantage. So what happens is they take a known virus or bacteria or protozoa and they chop it up, they kill it. And to make sure that it doesn't reassemble or come back to life, they only use a part of it, usually like the exterior cell protein, because that is a much higher chance of being found in the body if the real thing comes along. So they take like an exterior cell protein and leave out anything in the middle and inject it into the human body or any mammal body. What happens is these exterior cell proteins now float through the body and get detected by the immune system. The immune system realizes this is not a authorized molecule, and it starts making antibodies for it. But not only antibodies, it makes memory cells. These memory cells, these memory cells stay for a long time in the body and remember the molecule like a bad dream. For the rest of the memory cell's life, it stays on alert for other identifications of the same molecule. So in the future, if the molecule is ever detected again, it'll churn out memory cells, and as well as churn out antibodies. Follow-on true infection after a vaccination serves the same purpose as having a second infection after the first infection. How is this better? Imagine this: the first infection, there are no antibodies for the invader, known by the body, known by the immune system, known by the police database that you keep inside your body. Once it's detected, then it has to create these antibody factories, and then the factories can start pumping out antibodies. But the memory cells act like factories that are in existence but hang around. Once the invasion is over, the factories for those antibodies go into standby mode. And then the second time the infection is noticed, then they don't have to wait for new factories to come online. The factories already exist. They were in standby mode, and they just need to be switched back on. So the antibody response is much faster. And by the way, memory cells trigger the creation of new memory cells, more memory cells. If the first infection or the vaccination triggers like thousands of antibodies to be produced, then the second infection triggers hundreds of thousands of antibodies to be produced, and then the third infection triggers millions of antibodies to be produced in a short amount of time. So every subsequent infection or every subsequent booster shot of the vaccine leaves more and more memory cells to hang around for the near or distant future, and so the antibody response is greater and faster each time, and sometimes that's what it takes. Some vaccines are one and done, but some vaccines need to be repeated. So like the tetanus vaccine needs to be given about every 10 years. If you've ever had something dirty stuck into your body and you go to the hospital, the doctor is going to ask, when was your last tetanus vaccine? And if you say less than 10 years or more than 10 years ago, they're going to give you another one, a new one. Some infections require multiple booster shots all within less than a year. The hepatitis B vaccine, and for those of you who are in healthcare, you know what I'm talking about. The hepatitis B as in boy vaccine takes 3 shots spaced a month apart in order for enough memory cells to be around to provide actual immunity. Immunity is when the body has so many antibody factories that they are effectively unable to be infected by that organism. So what about the COVID vaccine? Why seems like every year they come out with a new vaccine for a new strain? The COVID virus, along with a few other viruses, mutate too fast. The scientists make up a vaccine against COVID, and then that's pretty effective against the existing known COVID virus, but the virus mutates and makes different different surface proteins, surface molecules, and so they have to invent another, they have to take some of those surface molecules and make a new vaccine out of it. Why is the COVID vaccine mutate so fast? Is it because it was designed in a secret government lab? I don't know about the secret government lab theory, but many viruses do that. For example, the HIV virus does that. The common cold virus does that in an oversimplified way. That's why the vaccines for HIV and the common cold do not exist. They try to do it. They try to make it, and researchers always try to chase that holy grail of like a common cold virus vaccine, but so far they still haven't been able to do it because those viruses just mutate too damn fast. Well, to be more specific, the cold virus, the virus that causes the common cold, there's just too many. It is in the corona family as well as a rhinovirus family, and there are just so many, and any one of them could cause the common cold, because the common cold is not one specific disease. A common cold is a bunch of millions and millions of different kinds of viruses that all cause the same symptoms: mild cough, mucus buildup, very mild fever, feeling of uncomfortableness, but and then it pretty much ends there, right? So here are some different variants of the vaccines, and you know what? For time management, I'm going to keep it short. But anyway, these are different kinds of immunity. Immunity means the body is rendered protected against a specific disease. Okay, so that's where we got the flu shot from. Every year, around this time, actually, the autumn, every year, people are recommended to get the flu shot. And what happens is it's different every year. So unlike, let's say, hepatitis B or tetanus that lasts for years, the flu shot needs to be reintroduced every year. And that's because the influenza virus mutates so fast. There are also many variants of influenza, and they all need a separate. They all have a separate molecule. How do they know which variants of influenza are more likely than others to appear next winter? They watch the southern hemisphere. Remember, countries in the south of the equator, like Australia, they are six. Their winter is our summer. Their summer is our winter. So while we're having our summer, Australia was going through their winter. So they were having their flu season, and scientists watch those viruses very carefully, and they guesstimate, or they make a best guess of which one of those are likely to show up on our side of the earth when we have our winter, and they make a vaccine to specify it against those. Why don't they make a vaccine for every possible virus? Well, that's impossible. That is just impossible. They'd have to inject a gallon into our arms to cover them all. But the public will not tolerate that kind of coverage. So they try to make a vaccine that is large enough to cover as much as possible within reason. So I said they guesstimate. They take a guess about which viruses are most likely, which versions of the influenza virus are most likely to show up on our land when it's our turn to have autumn and winter, and then they hope for the best. So they guess. How good are these guesses? Annually, about 50%. It's a 50-50 shot. So sometimes they guess right, and the vaccines that are included do cover the virus that does show up. Sometimes a virus shows up that was not part of the southern hemisphere observation, and it blindsides the public health officials on this side of the earth. When you see this, you think of other things that were a 50-50 shot. Well, the coin flip is a 50-50 shot. What else is a 50-50 chance of success? Oh, well, test results. If you get a 50 on a test, that's fail. You get an F for that test. So you see the word 50 and you think, oh my God, that's pretty bad. Especially those who are adversely affected by the flu vaccine, like they get side effects that are uncomfortable or painful. And of course, those who think that the flu shot is a government conspiracy to control your minds or render you sterile or any other of your favorite theories out there. You decide, you know what, 50-50, not that great of a result. I think I'll skip it. That's one way to look at it. Did you know that influenza kills about 50,000 Americans every year? Don't believe me? Let's give it a look. Influenza death rate per year. As always, I skip the artificial intelligence generation. Center for Disease Control, let's see, the flu. While the burden of flu can vary each year, flu places, CDC estimates that the flu has resulted in over 9 million illnesses, 700,000 or 100,000 hospitalizations or more, and 5 to 50,000 deaths annually between 2010 and 2023. So it can, and then there have been numbers that go up to 60,000 depending on the year. That's a lot of people who died, and as after the vaccination program. So let's say, since it is a Center for Disease Control, 5 to 50, let's split the difference and make it 25,000. 25,000, and I think the number is lower because of COVID. How is that possible? How can the presence of COVID reduce the death rate from influenza? Well, remember the all of those public health advisories during the COVID lockdown that limit the spread of COVID around the population. Guess what it did to other infectious disease? When people were social distancing, when people were isolating, when people were wearing masks, ability of other infectious diseases to spread among the population also was impaired, was also slowed down. So the death rates from influenza also fell during the lockdown. So here you are as a public health official. You know that because of the flu shot vaccine program, even after that, 25,000 year after year, sometimes up to 50,000 people die year after year. That means that, and it's only 50% effective. That means that if you had no vaccination program for influenza, then that would double the number. That 50 to 100,000 Americans would die as a result of no vaccination program. Do you, as a public health official, do you want that on your conscience? But let's take a closer view at which kinds of people actually did die from the flu, because you get the flu, I get the flu. Every time we got the regular flu, our symptoms at the worst our symptoms ever got was we got some fever, we got some inflammation, we got some pain, we got some mucus buildup, and that's it. And our bodies ached for like a few days. But then a few days later, maybe we took off work for like 1 day or 2 days. But after a few days, we felt much better, and we came back to work, and it's all got. The flu didn't seem that big of a risk for you. Then who actually dies from this thing? Well, the answer is the people who die from the flu tend to be very sick and the very old. So then, who really, really, really should get the flu shot? The very sick and the very old. And who else? Anybody who takes care of the very sick and the very old. So if you have any intention of being a healthcare provider, you need to get the flu shot too. The most common complaint against the flu shot is every time I get it, I get sick anyway. So there are two possibilities. Well, there's a bunch of possibilities, but there's two most common explanations for why this is happening. Well, the flu shot is only 50% effective, so maybe you are in that other 50%. You got the flu shot and you got sick, you got the real flu anyway, and that's understandable. But there's another one. How do you know you got sick anyway? What told you that you got the flu anyway? Did you feel swelling? Did you feel pain? Did you feel mucus? Did you feel congestion? That sounds familiar. Isn't that what this individual got? The ones who had the pain, the mucus, the swelling, and the fever? So maybe what you're feeling is the flu shot working. Because remember, what was the point of a vaccine? The point of the vaccine is to trick your body into thinking you got infected, so that your body will start generating antibodies. So how does your body know it got infected? These are not caused by the influenza virus. These are caused by your body trying to fight off the virus. Not everybody feels these things. Every time I got the flu shot, I never felt any of this. Sometimes I feel like, I suspect like I got cheated. Like I'm supposed to feel these things, but I don't. It's just the way my immune system responds. I'm sure it did it was just below my radar. It wasn't bad enough to me actually noticing. Sometimes the COVID shot made me feel these things, and sometimes it didn't. I got 5. So that's 2 explanations of why you think you got sick. Okay. Speaking of the COVID vaccine, you've heard stories of people who got a serious side effect from the vaccine. And the main explanation is nothing in medicine is 100% guaranteed. Nothing, no treatment in medicine has 0 side effects. Everything in medicine has side effects. And some people, the side effects are severe. Name it, any therapy, from aspirin to a Band-Aid to a ride in the ambulance, they all have side effects. And in the speaking of the ride on the ambulance, sometimes people died because they rode on the ambulance. The ambulance got into a car accident. It rolled over and it caused patient deaths. Does that mean that we should make ambulances illegal because some people have died while riding on an ambulance? It means that sometimes an ambulance ride justifies the risk of getting into a car accident. And so we should keep driving ambulances, but we should drive it very, very carefully. It should be under supervision when possible, when practical. So the COVID vaccine, some people have died. Some people have died from the COVID vaccine. Now, according to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, and the last result I saw was in 2023, they saw that of the people who did die, those people already had serious heart disease before they got COVID. And so that is one explanation. How many people got the vaccine? Millions and millions of people got the vaccine. So even a 1% of million is still 10,000. So millions and millions, we're talking tens of thousands of people who died, because 1% of a billion is 10,000. So tens of thousands of people have died. Somewhere in there, I'm sure there were people who died because of severe unexpected events, even though they were not sick. These are just the reported facts. So here's another analogy. There are people who were killed on the street, on the sidewalk, by a car. They were walking on the sidewalk, and the sidewalks were there to prevent cars from hitting people, pedestrians. But there are sometimes a car accident veered off the road, entered the sidewalk, and killed somebody who was walking on the sidewalk. Does that mean that sidewalks are completely useless? That it's safer to walk in the middle of the street? And you may say, that's stupid, that is a horrible analogy. Of course everybody knows not to walk in the middle of the street. This is how, as obvious as staying on the sidewalk is for you, getting a vaccine against this dangerous virus is that obvious for people who know about these things. It's all about the bell curve. You know somebody who got the vaccine and got sick anyway. You know somebody who got the vaccine and died from the vaccine. Does that mean you are not here? Does that mean you are here? Or does that mean that since you are here, you should get the vaccine anyway? Here's a few slides of various well-known infections, just to let you know as an example. For those who are wondering, what's the difference between the common cold and the flu? Here's a slide for that. Treatments for it. Because the cold is so mild, it rarely ever leads to a serious infection, although sometimes it does. Especially people who are immunocompromised. Immunocompromised means their immune system is not working properly, and either because of a disease or a treatment. For example, the treatment for cancer one of the treatments for cancer, chemotherapy, is to stop most cell division. What kinds of cells are supposed to be dividing a lot anyway? Well, skin cells, hair cells, and immune cells. How do you make more immune defenses? By stimulating cell division. But if you're taking a medication that limits cell division because you're trying to limit the growth of cancer cells, no wonder the immune cells are not dividing. No wonder you are especially, people who get chemotherapy are especially vulnerable to infection. So for them, a simple cold infection can be a death sentence. Flu is a little more serious. It takes even ordinary healthy people and knocks them out of work for a day or two, and then it takes sick people. You don't have to wait for somebody to be immunocompromised. Somebody who is already very sick for other reasons, it can be life-threatening. So it could mean a trip to the hospital for people who are already sick. So I said that there are other kinds of pathogens other than bacteria and viruses, and here's a list of them. Here are some infections that have been in the news lately. And you've seen the word epidemic. You've seen the word pandemic by now. Before COVID, nobody outside of healthcare knew what a pandemic was. In fact, many people in healthcare didn't know what a pandemic was, but now everybody knows. A pandemic is an epidemic that spreads across international borders. An endemic, on the flip side, an endemic is a disease that is prevalent or present every year after year, in a small part of the population. It never seems to go away. It doesn't rise to epidemic proportions, but it never seems to go away either. It's always there, and it just kind of simmers at low levels throughout the population, decade after decade. The classic example I give for New York City is asthma. I mentioned asthma already in the allergy, under the allergy slide. If you want to work as an ambulance worker, EMT or paramedic in Queens or Brooklyn, and you want to do this as a full-time job, 40 hours a week, expect to get an asthma emergency about once a week. If you work in, and Staten Island too, if you work in Manhattan, expect to get an asthma emergency about once per shift. Like a 10-hour shift, you'll get at least one. If you work in the Bronx, you'll get an asthma emergency about 2 to 3 times per shift, per 10-hour shift. EMS shifts can be between 8 and 12 hours long. Why? Why is asthma such an endemic in the Bronx, but also in New York City in general? Lots of theories. It could be like a combination of many reasons, but that is like a fact of life. Okay, typical infection curve. Somebody got exposed to an infectious organism, and then a few days later, the hospitals around the area start to report an increase in number of cases, and this upward spike is called an epidemic. But then at some point, the number of people left who are not yet infected start to drop, because the people who were infected either got cured and got immunity and now they cannot be reinfected, or they died, which means they cannot be reinfected, or they left the area, they moved out, so their numbers don't count in the local community count. So the number of people left who are not yet exposed, not yet infected, we start running out of people. We start running out of people to infect. And meanwhile, the number of people who are immune and cannot be infected because they got over this infection are increasing. So the number of people who are cured and immune start to outpace the people who are not yet infected, and the number of total people infected start to drop. Until at some point it runs into an endemic stage. If it's not completely wiped out, it'll stay in an endemic stage, which means I should change this to, well, eventually days becomes years, and eventually the only people left who are not yet infected, who are still vulnerable to this infectious organism, are immigrants and the newborn. Because everybody else has now had their turn to the exposure, and so they are now immune. And thereafter, years to decades, there will always be a small percentage of the population who newly gain this disease, but then they either survive and become immune themselves, or they move out, or they succumb to the disease, they die. This is a typical infection curve. Of course, in reality, the curves take much different shapes. So what about the COVID virus, the COVID pandemic, or at least the epidemic here in the United States? What did it look like? Well, depends. So what if nothing was ever done? So no public health effort. What if reports from hospitals started pouring in early in 2020, and the hospital started complaining to the public health office, something's happening, something's up. People are coming in, we're getting overwhelmed, we're getting crowded, you got to do something. And all the public health officials, the government officials, who was president at this time? Who was president at this time? Who tried to say this is a hoax, this isn't fake, COVID is fake? Anyway, they do nothing. Say whatever, let God sort it out. Anyway, why did they do absolutely nothing? Then the epidemic curve, the number of people who become sick, including the number of people who become seriously sick, will start to rise and rise and rise. And now we add a new line to this graph. This is a hypothetical limit of the healthcare system. The total number of beds, the total number of ventilators, the total number of doctors, nurses, and ambulance workers. We don't make more of those in a short amount of time. Whatever we got when the epidemic started, that's what we got. It takes years to make new doctors, new nurses, new ambulance workers. So whatever you got, you got. At the COVID epidemic could easily cause the number of infected, the number who are severely infected, so severely infected that they need a hospital bed, they need an ICU bed, they need ventilators, and send them far above the number of actual beds are available. This is the nightmare scenario. What happens to people who need a bed but don't get a bed? What happens to people who need a ventilator but don't get a ventilator? What happens to people who need an ambulance but there was no ambulance? During the COVID pandemic here in New York, the ambulance call rates, the 911 call rates came up to 8,000 per day, 8,000 calls per day. Before COVID showed up, a typical heavy day, a typical day in the 911 system was 4,000 a day. When the numbers got to near 4,000, like 3,900 something, everyone would go, "Ooh, wow, that was a busy day." But during COVID, it went double. So this is what happens if nothing is done. So what does this red area mean? Well, if you need a bed but you don't get a bed, what happens to you? You don't make it. You're dead. You die. In ancient times, when a plague swept through a land and it exceeded the healthcare providers' ability of that kingdom, there were bodies in the streets. dead bodies were thrown into the middle of the street. Well, how about our time? Where were the bodies in our streets? Well, we'll talk about that. Okay, so that is the worst case scenario, no public health effort to try to reduce this, to deal with this epidemic. The best case scenario is if you slow down the rate of rise of the infected. How do you do that? Well, how does COVID spread from one person to another with respiratory droplets? So how do you slow down the rise of COVID across a population? You mandate social distancing, you make everybody wear masks in public spaces, you invent a vaccine as fast as possible, and deploy it to the population as soon as possible. And if in the best case scenario, in a perfect world, by the time the epidemic starts to pick up speed, suddenly the number of people available to be infected to spread it to each other start to diminish as these public health efforts take hold. And the number of people who need a bed stays inside the total number of beds available. So nobody is left without treatment. Now, in a typical epidemic curve, it finally slows down as the number of people who are not yet infected are become less than the number of people who were infected and became immune, or were infected and died. So the total number of cases dropped. What about here? When you flatten the curve, which is what I was trying to get at, when you flatten the curve, you take this curve and you squish it down. That means then that the curve that should have been this low later stayed up, because all these people who are not yet infected because the virus hadn't reached them, they are walking around pretty much waiting to be infected. So the truth is that when a virus sweeps through a population, everybody's going to get exposed anyway. Everybody's going to be exposed eventually. The difference is that with this flattened curve, they are exposed later rather than sooner. If you allow all these people to be exposed sooner, then the rate will spike. But if you delay their exposure to some later time, then the graph will flatten. And that's what the phrase means, flatten the curve. Okay, worst case scenario, best case scenario. What happened in real life? There were no bodies in the streets because we're not that kind of a society. We don't allow disturbing images to be shown to the public. But there were people who needed a bed, didn't get a bed. There were people who needed a ventilator, didn't get a ventilator. There was a vaccine, but it showed up much later. And the vaccines, the first round vaccines that were provided were not perfect, were not that effective because it was rushed. They needed a vaccine soon. They needed a vaccine yesterday. So so many of the safety features that causes vaccines to take a long time to develop, those were skipped over. So the side effect rates and the effectiveness rates of the first vaccines were not that great. Anyway, so the epidemic curve did sweep up. Oh, and not only that, but many of the efforts to slow down the rate, like social distancing and mask wearing, were out and out rejected by large parts of the population. Many parts of the population refuse to shut down, to lock down. Many people refuse to wear a mask. They happily spit their saliva at each other because of their rights. They had a right to spit their saliva at each other, and so the virus spread, and there were deaths. So what happened to these bodies? Where do we put these bodies? Do you remember stories of refrigerator trucks parked outside of hospitals? That's where. Not only were the intensive care units and emergency room beds filled, but the morgue was also filled. There were stories of bodies being stored in the chapel or in the hallways because the morgues were filling up. They had refrigerator trucks parked outside in order to hide it from the public and keep the bodies fresh so that they can be processed later when the resources finally got to them. And this is what happened to us. What do you do when the infection gets really, really bad? You go to the hospital. What do they do at the hospital? They give you an antibiotic or an antiviral or an antiparasitic. They figure out what you got, and then they give you the medication specific to that microbe. It's true when they say that an antibiotic will not work on viruses, an antiviral will not work on bacteria. They're not interchangeable. These are medications, and they are a tool. It's possible to use a tool incorrectly. If you use a hammer to try to fix a spring, it's not going to work. If you use a screwdriver like it's a hammer, it's not going to work. And the problem now is that this is a living organism. Some may say viruses are not living, but it's really gray, it's complicated. If you use a antimicrobial on an organism, the survivors will mutate. The antimicrobials, microbial. So this antibiotic is for bacteria, antiviral is for viruses. If you use an antimicrobial on a life form, it'll work for most of them. It'll kill most of them, but some will survive. Why? Because nothing is perfect, nothing is guaranteed, and nothing is 100%. So some will survive. But if you use it in the right way, the surviving percentage is really, really small. But if you use it in the wrong way, the surviving percentage is pretty high. And if the surviving percentage is high enough, then they will grow resistance. Resistance is when the targeted organism finds a way to make the antimicrobial not work anymore. That's resistance. This slideshow or this panel is an example of misused antibiotics. Imagine these are like microscope slides, and they took a sample from somebody who's sick, and just to oversimplify, a clear box is bacteria sensitive to an antibiotic. A gray box is a bacteria resistant to an antibiotic. Resistance is not all or nothing. Nothing in biology is 100%, but the ones that are gray tend to survive the antibiotic better, and the ones who are clear tend to succumb to the antibiotic sooner. Anyway, somebody got infected, and then because bacteria divide and grow, every time there was a box, I just made a copy of it. So there were 2 resistant boxes, I made 4, etc. So this person feels a little sick now, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you got infected, here, take this antibiotic. And it's 10 days, and you want to take all 10 days, the entire course. And this antibiotic is kind of pricey. This person doesn't have health insurance. They had to pay in cash, out of pocket. So anyway, they thought, well, I mean, this is my health, and I'm feeling pretty bad, so I'll pay for it. I'll skip a meal, or I'll skip a car payment or something, and I'll pay for this drug. So they take it, and it does work. So notice that all the clear ones are killed. Most of them are killed off, but the 4 gray ones are still alive because it's resistant. And if they continued taking the antibiotic, then eventually even the gray ones will get killed off, and the body will be completely clear and empty of this bacteria. But instead, this individual just says, you know what, I feel great now. I feel the same as I did a week ago, and now I still have like a bunch of antibiotics left. So you know what, I'm gonna do the smart thing, and I'm gonna save these remaining pills for later. They don't take the full course of antibiotic. So they decide, you know what, yeah, so they put the remaining pills on the shelf in the medicine cabinet, and they go about the rest of their life. Well, because these 8 are still alive, they go on to reproduce, and eventually the patient starts to feel sick again. And now, does this person think, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have followed doctor's orders? No, they're going to think, I'm so smart, I saved these for later, and the good thing I did because this infection came back, so they took it again. But what happens now? Yes, the antibiotic works on the clear bacteria, but does nothing to the gray bacteria. And they do this a few times until they finally use the last antibiotic, but now they see that it doesn't work anymore, because the majority of the bacteria are resistant thanks to their behavior in not using the full course of antibiotic. So now what does the person think? Do they think, I'm so stupid, I should have followed doctor's directions? No, they're going to think, my doctor is an idiot. My doctor is incompetent. He gave me these pills and they don't work. I am sick, I feel like crap. I'm going to go to another doctor, because the first one obviously doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So he goes to another doctor, the doctor does some tests, and then the doctor tells the patient, your infection is from a drug-resistant strain of bacteria. The antibiotic you were given is no longer effective. I'm going to have to give you the second-line drug. The second-line drug is more expensive. It has more powerful side effects. It's going to make you feel worse, but you really need to take it, because if the bacteria mutates to be resistant to this one too, then we have no more antibiotic for this strain of bacteria. This is how antibiotic resistance grows. Is it individuals then? Is it individuals who don't follow directions the cause of bacterial resistance in the world? No. There are some people who do it on purpose, and they are farms, commercial farms, where animals, pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, other farm animals, they are in herds, and they are kept in herds in tight spaces, and in order to save money, these corporate farms jam them into tight, confined spaces, which almost guarantees that if one gets sick, they all get sick, and that hurts profits. So it's actually more profitable to put antibiotics in their food, even if they're not yet sick, because these antibiotics they use are cheap, or they get them on the cheap in bulk prices. But by misusing them, by giving them to all animals, even when they don't need them, it means that when an animal does get sick anyway, it guarantees that those microbes that cause the sickness, a bacteria or virus, is resistant to the antibiotic or the antiviral. So these factory farms are actually the ones generating the most bacterial resistance. And then these viruses and bacteria jump to humans, and then when that person goes to the doctor and complains, and then the doctor is shocked to find that none of the known drugs will fight this strain of the microbe. There's another way that resistance is grown, which is that sometimes the healthcare provider doesn't use them properly and creates this effect anyway. And there are places in the world where people can buy antibiotics without a doctor's prescription, which means they're buying the wrong antibiotic for the wrong disease, and that also contributes to growing resistance. So today we have microbes that are MDR, multi-drug resistant. What happens if they get infected and the hospital realizes it? They're pretty much just put into the intensive care unit, a special quarantine lab, a quarantine ward, and they're just kept supportive therapy, which means they're provided with rest and warmth, food and liquids, and hope that the body can fight it off by itself because we have no drug to fight it. So I talked about sexually transmitted diseases in the previous week, and here it is again. And I won't go into the details, but realize that it's transmitted by skin-to-skin contact. So a barrier device is your only hope. Barrier device is more reliable than trust. Barrier device is more effective than trusting your loved partner. And not only that, but there are antibiotic resistant sexually transmitted diseases going around the world, specifically gonorrhea and chlamydia. There are strains of antibiotic resistant gonorrhea and chlamydia working their way around the world as we speak. How do you avoid your risk? Well, use a condom. That's really it. That's pretty much it. And then avoid things that will cause you to make poor choices, such as not using a condom. And here's one example. I talked about this in class already. Incubation period. I forgot to mention that. What's an incubation period? The time from the first exposure to when you feel the symptoms. In this case, the patient felt symptoms and went to the hospital. So if you got exposed on day 2, then the incubation period is from day 2 to day 6, or 4 days. 4 days. Does that make sense? That's the incubation period. The time from exposure to the feeling, to the noticing that you've got symptoms. Okay. So more some of the well-known sexually transmitted diseases. A couple more, if you haven't heard of them, and why you should worry. So especially with women, there is a risk when a sexually transmitted disease enters into the vagina, then it may infect the uterus or the cervix, and then the uterus, and that could cause a pelvic inflammatory disease. The reason why that is a problem is that sometimes it causes it damages the reproductive structure so much that the only recourse is to remove it completely. So it's a complete organ removal, and the woman is sterile, unable to conceive children afterwards. If the woman is pregnant while she got that sexually transmitted disease, it could be transmitted to the baby, and the baby is born with birth complications. For guys, they're not out of the woods. There is a infection of the tube that connects the testicles to the urethra, and it's a common thing actually among young men. So wear a condom, folks. Anyway, that is the completion of the infectious disease lecture. You now have heard enough from me to attempt the homework and the quizzes. So good luck on that. And now you will see me next week.